The sun cast a harsh glare over Seattle, Washington in the spring of 1878, as Hope O'Malley stood trembling on the auction block, her brother's gambling debt hanging around her neck, heavier than any chain could. $500, called out the auctioneer, a wiry man with tobacco-stained teeth and a voice like gravel. Do I hear $500 for this fine young woman, healthy, strong, can cook and clean, perfect for any household or establishment? Hope clutched her shawl tighter around her shoulders, fighting back tears as she scanned the crowd of men gathered in the dusty square. Just yesterday, she had been free, working as a seamstress and living a modest but dignified life. Then her younger brother Patrick had burst into their small home, face ashen, pursued by two burly men who worked for Silas Thornton, the owner of the largest gambling house in Seattle. Your brother owes $500, one of the men had said, grabbing Patrick by the collar. Either he pays by noon tomorrow, or we take something of equal value. Now here she stood, her brother nowhere in sight, sold to cover his debt. Hope had never felt such a mixture of fear, shame, and betrayal in her 22 years of life. 500 going once, the auctioneer called, pointing to a red-faced man in the front row who had made the bid. The man leered at Hope, making her stomach turn. $1,000. A murmur rippled through the crowd as a tall figure stepped forward from the back. The man wore a black Stetson pulled low over his eyes, a leather vest over a faded blue shirt, and dusty riding chaps. His boots made little noise as he approached the auction block, and when he lifted his head, Hope found herself looking into the bluest eyes she had ever seen. $1,000, he repeated, his voice deep and steady. The auctioneer blinked in surprise. Well, that's double the debt, sir. I'm aware, the stranger said, reaching into his vest and pulling out a leather pouch. He counted out 10 $100 bills and placed them in the auctioneer's hand. This woman's debt is paid. She's free to go. Now wait just a minute, the red-faced bidder protested, stepping forward with his fists clenched. I had the winning bid at 500. The stranger turned slowly, and something in his expression made the other man step back. The lady's debt is paid in full with interest. She belongs to no one. Hope could hardly believe her ears. Was this some cruel joke? Would she simply be taken by this stranger instead? The auctioneer counted the money again, then nodded. The debt is paid in full. Miss O'Malley is free to go. The stranger turned to Hope and extended his hand to help her down from the platform. Miss O'Malley, I'm Tyler Young. You're free now. You can go wherever you please. Hope hesitantly placed her hand in his and stepped down from the auction block, her legs weak beneath her. Why would you do this for a stranger, Mr. Young? Tyler Young's eyes softened slightly. No person should be sold to cover another's mistakes, not in this country, not anywhere. Hope looked up at this mysterious cowboy, still unable to comprehend what had just happened. I have nowhere to go, Mr. Young. My brother has disappeared, and our landlord will have surely rented our rooms by now. Tyler adjusted his hat, squinting at the horizon. I own a small cattle ranch about 10 miles outside of town. I need someone to help with cooking and mending. It's honest work with fair pay. You're welcome to the position if you want it. Hope studied him, searching for any sign of deception. And if I decline? Then I'll give you enough money to secure new lodgings in town until you find work. The choice is yours, Miss O'Malley. For the first time since her brother had betrayed her, Hope felt the smallest spark of hope ignite in her chest. She had no reason to trust this man, but something in his straightforward manner and clear gaze told her that his offer was genuine. I accept your offer of employment, Mr. Young, she said at last, but I want to be clear that I'm working for you, not indebted to you. A small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Understood, Miss O'Malley. I wouldn't have it any other way. As they walked away from the auction square, Hope could feel the stares of the townspeople on her back. Her reputation in Seattle was surely ruined now, but as the town receded behind them and Tyler helped her onto his wagon, she found herself looking forward rather than back. We'll stop by your old lodgings to collect your belongings, Tyler said as he took the reins. Then we'll head to the ranch before sundown. Hope nodded, watching his profile as he guided the horses through the busy streets. Tyler Young was a mystery cowboy who had spent $1,000 to free a woman he didn't know. As the wagon rattled along, Hope wondered what kind of man he truly was and what awaited her at his ranch outside of Seattle. The landlord had indeed already started clearing out Hope's modest room when they arrived. The squat, balding man was in the process of tossing her few possessions into a crate when Tyler knocked firmly on the doorframe. "I believe those belong to Miss O'Malley," Tyler said, his voice carrying a quiet authority that made the landlord pause mid-throw. "She's 3 days late on rent," the landlord protested, clutching one of Hope's dresses. "Law says I can claim her things." Tyler reached into his vest again and produced a $5 gold piece. "This should cover what she owes, plus interest." The landlord's eyes widened at the sight of the coin. He snatched it quickly and stepped back. "Take your things then, and be quick about it." Hope worked swiftly, gathering her clothes, her sewing kit, a small wooden box containing her mother's wedding ring, and a well-worn copy of Pride and Prejudice, her most treasured possession. Within 15 minutes, her entire life was packed into one trunk and loaded onto Tyler's wagon. As they left Seattle behind, Hope watched the city shrink in the distance. The afternoon sun bathed the surrounding forest in golden light, and for the first time that day, she took a deep breath of the fresh spring air. "May I ask you something, Mr. Young?" Hope ventured after they had traveled in silence for some time. Tyler glanced at her, then returned his eyes to the road. "You can ask me anything, Miss O'Malley. I might not answer, but you can ask. Why were you at that auction? You don't seem like the type of man who would." She couldn't finish the sentence. Tyler was quiet for so long that Hope thought he might not answer at all. Finally, he said, "I was in town delivering cattle to the butcher, heard about the auction from the barber while getting a trim." He paused. "My mother was sold to cover my grandfather's debts when she was young. No one stepped in to help her." Hope felt her heart constrict at his words. "I'm sorry about your mother." "It was a long time ago," Tyler said, though his jaw tightened. "She survived. Taught me that a person's worth isn't measured in dollars." They fell silent again as the wagon traveled along the winding road that led away from Seattle. The forest gradually thinned, giving way to rolling meadows dotted with wildflowers. In the distance, Hope could see the Olympic Mountains, their snow-capped peaks gleaming in the afternoon sun. "Is it much farther?" she asked after another mile had passed. "Just over that ridge," Tyler replied, pointing to a gentle hill ahead. "Not the biggest spread in Washington territory, but it's mine. Paid for it with 6 years of driving cattle from Texas." As they crested the hill, Hope saw a small valley open up before them. A modest log house with a stone chimney stood near a creek that wound through the property. A barn, corral, and a few outbuildings completed the ranch. It wasn't grand, but it was neat and well-maintained. "It's lovely," Hope said sincerely. Tyler's expression softened slightly. "It's home." As they approached the ranch, a large black and white dog came bounding toward the wagon, barking enthusiastically. Behind it, a tall, wiry man with a shock of gray hair emerged from the barn. "That's Hank," Tyler explained. "My foreman and only hired hand. The dog is Scout." The wagon rolled to a stop in front of the house and Tyler helped Hope down. The dog circled them, sniffing curiously at Hope's skirts. "You're back early, boss," Hank called as he approached. His eyes widened slightly when he saw Hope. "Didn't realize you were bringing company." "Hank, this is Miss Hope O'Malley. She'll be working here as our cook and housekeeper. Miss O'Malley, this is Hank Morrison. He helps me run this place." Hank touched the brim of his worn hat. "Madam, welcome to Circle Y Ranch." "Thank you, Mr. Morrison," Hope replied, trying to stand tall despite her exhaustion and the emotional turmoil of the day. "Hank, would you mind unloading Miss O'Malley's trunk and taking it to the guest room? I'll show her around the house." Hank nodded and began untying the trunk while Tyler led Hope to the house. The main room was simple but comfortable, with a stone fireplace, a wooden table with 4 chairs, a small sofa covered in a worn quilt, and bookshelves filled with more volumes than Hope would have expected. "Kitchen's through there," Tyler said, pointing to a doorway. My room's on the left down that hall. Guest room, your room now is on the right. There's a washroom out back. Hope took in the sparse but clean surroundings. It's very nice, Mr. Young. Tyler ran a hand through his dark hair, suddenly looking uncomfortable. I know it's not what you're used to in town. It's perfect, Hope interrupted, and far better than where I feared I might end up today. Something flickered in Tyler's blue eyes, perhaps surprise, perhaps something else. Well, you must be hungry. I'm not much of a cook, but I can fry up some bacon and eggs. Please let me, Hope said. It's why I'm here, isn't it? To earn my keep. Tyler studied her for a moment. You've had a difficult day, Miss O'Malley. You don't need to start working right away. I'd prefer to, Hope insisted. It will help me feel normal again. Tyler nodded slowly. All right then, I'll show you where everything is in the kitchen. The kitchen was small but well equipped with a cast iron stove, a pump sink, and a pantry stocked with basic staples. Hope quickly familiarized herself with the layout and set about preparing a simple meal of bacon, eggs, and biscuits. As she worked, she could hear Tyler and Hank talking in low voices outside. The normalcy of cooking helped steady her nerves, giving her something familiar to focus on after the chaos of the day. By the time Tyler and Hank came in for dinner, Hope had set the table and placed a steaming plate of food at each setting. The men washed up at the sink, and when they sat down, both looked at the food with appreciative eyes. This looks mighty fine, Miss O'Malley, Hank said, reaching for a biscuit. Thank you, Mr. Morrison. It's nothing fancy, I'm afraid. Tyler took a bite of the eggs and raised his eyebrows. It's delicious, far better than our usual fare. They ate mostly in silence, the men clearly hungry after a day's work. When they had finished, Hank pushed back his chair with a satisfied sigh. Best meal I've had in months, madam. If you'll excuse me, I need to check on the horses before turning in. After Hank left, Hope began clearing the table. Tyler rose to help her, taking dishes to the sink. You don't have to do that, Hope said, surprised. My mother taught me to pull my own weight, Tyler replied simply. I won't treat you like a servant, Miss O'Malley. As they worked side by side washing and drying the dishes, Hope felt some of the tension leave her body. Whatever had brought her to this place, at least she seemed to have found herself in the company of a decent man. Mr. Young, she said as they finished, I want to thank you again for what you did today. I don't know how I'll ever repay you. Tyler dried his hands on a towel and turned to face her. There's nothing to repay. Your wages will be $20 a month plus room and board. You'll have Sundays off and you're free to go into town when you need to, though it's a fair ride. Hope blinked at the generous terms. It was more than she had made as a seamstress. That's very fair, she said. Tyler nodded. You should get some rest now. It's been a long day and morning comes early on a ranch. Hope suddenly felt the full weight of exhaustion press down on her. Yes, I think I will. Good night, Mr. Young. Good night, Miss O'Malley. As Hope prepared for bed in her new room, she could hear the soft sounds of the ranch settling down for the night, the distant lowing of cattle, the occasional bark from Scout, the creaking of the wooden house as it cooled in the evening air. Her mind returned to the events of the day, to her brother's betrayal and the mysterious cowboy who had saved her from a terrible fate. She still couldn't fathom why Tyler Young had spent so much money to free her. His explanation about his mother seemed genuine, but something told her there was more to the story than he had shared. As she drifted toward sleep, Hope made a silent promise to herself. She would work hard, earn her keep, and one day, somehow, she would find a way to truly thank the man who had given her back her freedom. The rooster's crow startled Hope awake just as the first pale light of dawn was filtering through her window. For a moment, she was disoriented, the unfamiliar room confusing her sleep-addled mind. Then the memories of the previous day came rushing back, the auction block, Tyler Young's unexpected intervention, and her arrival at Circle Y Ranch. She dressed quickly in one of her simple work dresses and pinned her honey-brown hair into a practical bun. When she emerged from her room, she found the main living area empty, but she could hear movement in the kitchen. There she found Tyler, already dressed in work clothes, brewing coffee on the stove. Good morning, he said, glancing up as she entered. Hope I didn't wake you. The rooster does a good enough job of that. Good morning, Mr. Young, Hope replied. I'm usually an early riser anyway. Tyler poured coffee into 2 cups and offered one to Hope. Hank and I have already fed the animals. We'll be moving some cattle to the north pasture today. Hope accepted the cup gratefully. What would you like for breakfast? Whatever's easiest. We usually just have coffee and bread in the mornings. Hope shook her head. Working men need a proper breakfast. If you don't mind waiting a few minutes, I'll make something more substantial. Tyler looked like he might protest, but instead nodded. Thank you, I'll get some firewood for the stove. While he was outside, Hope explored the pantry more thoroughly. She found flour, sugar, salt, eggs, and a slab of bacon enough to make a decent breakfast. By the time Tyler returned with an armload of wood, she had batter ready for pancakes and bacon sizzling in a cast iron skillet. Hank joined them as Hope was placing stacks of golden pancakes on the table. His weathered face broke into a wide smile at the sight. Miss O'Malley, you're going to spoil us something terrible, he said, taking his seat. It's no trouble at all, Hope assured him. They ate with the hearty appetite of people who knew they had a full day's work ahead. Hope was pleased to see both men take second helpings of everything. What will you do today? Tyler asked as they finished their meal. Hope considered the question. I thought I might take inventory of the pantry and make a list of supplies we need, then perhaps tackle some of the mending I saw in the basket by the sofa. Tyler nodded. That would be helpful. We usually ride into town for supplies once a month, but we can go sooner if you need anything. I'm sure I can make do with what's here for now, Hope said, not eager to return to Seattle so soon after her public humiliation. After Tyler and Hank left to tend to the cattle, Hope set about exploring her new domain more thoroughly. The house was simply furnished but solid, built to withstand the harsh winters of the Washington Territory. There were signs of neglect in the domestic details: curtains that needed washing, floors that could use a good scrubbing, and plenty of clothes awaiting repair, but overall, the place was well kept for a home with only men in residence. She spent the morning cleaning the kitchen and taking inventory of supplies. At midday, she prepared a simple lunch of bean soup and cornbread, wrapping portions for Tyler and Hank to take with them to the pastures. Scout accompanied her as she carried the food out to where the men were working, the dog bounding ahead and then circling back as if to make sure she was following. Tyler looked surprised when she approached with the food. You didn't need to bring this out to us, Miss O'Malley. It's no trouble, she said, handing him a bundle wrapped in a clean cloth. The walk was pleasant and I wanted to see more of the ranch. Tyler's face softened momentarily. Thank you, he gestured toward the surrounding landscape. This is most of it, 160 acres. Not as big as some spreads, but enough for now. Hope looked around at the rolling meadows dotted with grazing cattle, the creek that wound through the property, and the distant line of trees that marked the boundary. It's beautiful. It is, Tyler agreed, something like pride warming his voice. As Hope walked back to the house, she felt some of the tension that had gripped her since the previous day begin to ease. The open spaces, clean air, and honest work offered a different kind of life than she had known in Seattle, but perhaps it was exactly what she needed. The afternoon passed quickly as Hope turned her attention to the basket of mending. She found shirts with missing buttons, socks with holes, and pants with torn seams, all easy fixes for someone with her skills. As she worked, her mind drifted to her brother Patrick. Where was he now? Had he fled Seattle after gambling away his sister's freedom? The anger and hurt she felt toward him were still raw, but beneath them lay worry. For all his faults, Patrick was her only family, and they had looked after each other since their parents died of influenza 5 years ago. Hope was so absorbed in her thoughts that she didn't hear Tyler return until he spoke from the doorway. You've been busy, he said, nodding toward the neat pile of repaired clothes. Hope startled slightly. Yes, it helped pass the time. Tyler removed his hat and hung it on a peg by the door. His dark hair was damp with sweat, and there was a smudge of dirt on his cheek. I appreciate it. I've been meaning to fix those for weeks. It's what you're paying me for, Hope reminded him, though she offered a small smile to soften the words. Tyler studied her for a moment, then said, I've been meaning to ask, do you have other family in Seattle? Someone who might be worried about you. Hope's smile faded. Only my brother Patrick, the one whose gambling debt you paid. She hesitated, then added, I doubt he's worried. He disappeared before the auction. A muscle tightened in Tyler's jaw. I'm sorry. It's not your fault, Hope said, looking down at the shirt in her lap. Patrick has always been reckless, but I never thought he would. She couldn't finish the sentence. Some men don't understand the consequences of their actions until it's too late, Tyler said quietly, or the impact those actions have on others. Something in his tone made Hope look up. There was a shadow in Tyler's eyes that suggested personal knowledge of such men. Did your mother ever forgive your grandfather? Hope asked, remembering what Tyler had told her about his family. Tyler moved to the fireplace, adding a log to the dying embers. No, he drank himself to death before she had the chance. But she forgave herself for being caught in his web of mistakes. That was the harder battle. Hope considered his words. I'm not sure I can forgive Patrick, not yet. No one could expect you to, Tyler said, turning to face her, but don't let his actions define your worth. That's the trap my mother nearly fell into. Their eyes met across the room, and Hope felt an unexpected connection form between them, two people whose lives had been shaped by others' poor choices. The moment was broken by Hank's arrival, stamping his boots outside before entering. Evening, folks. Something sure smells good. Hope had put a stew on to simmer earlier in the day, and the aroma now filled the house. It should be ready, she said, rising and setting aside her mending. I'll set the table. Dinner was a companionable affair, with Hank regaling Hope with stories about the ranch and the surrounding area. Tyler was quieter, but he seemed content to listen, occasionally adding a detail or correction to Hank's more colorful tales. After the meal, as Hope was washing the dishes, Tyler approached her with a book in his hand. I noticed you brought Pride and Prejudice with you, he said. Have you read this one? He held out a well-worn copy of Jane Eyre. Hope dried her hands on a towel, surprised. Yes, it's one of my favorites. I didn't take you for a reader of English novels, Mr. Young. A slight flush colored Tyler's tanned cheeks. My mother was a schoolteacher before. He cleared his throat. She made sure I was educated. Said books were windows to worlds I might never see otherwise. Hope took the book from him, her fingers brushing his briefly. She sounds like a wise woman. She was, Tyler said, and Hope noted the past tense with a pang of sympathy. Thank you for the loan, she said, holding the book carefully. I'll take good care of it. Tyler nodded. Good night, Miss O'Malley. Good night, Mr. Young. In her room that evening, Hope opened Jane Eyre and found an inscription on the flyleaf. To my dearest Tyler, may you always find courage in these pages as Jane did. With all my love, Mother. The personal nature of the loan touched Hope deeply. Tyler Young had not only saved her from a terrible fate and given her a job, he had also shared something precious from his past. It was a gesture of trust that she didn't take lightly. As she read by lamplight, the story of a plain, independent woman who found love against all odds resonated with Hope in a way it never had before. When she finally drifted off to sleep, the book still open on her chest, she dreamed not of the auction block or her brother's betrayal, but of wide open meadows and a pair of intense blue eyes that seemed to see straight to her soul. Days at the Circle Y ranch quickly settled into a rhythm. Hope rose at dawn to prepare breakfast for Tyler and Hank, spent her mornings cleaning and organizing the house, prepared lunch, and then devoted her afternoons to more specialized tasks like mending, baking, or preserving food. The work was constant but satisfying, giving her purpose and structure after the chaos that had preceded her arrival. Tyler was often gone from sunup to sundown, working with the cattle or repairing fences and outbuildings. When he was at the house, he was unfailingly polite but somewhat reserved, as if maintaining a deliberate distance. Still, Hope occasionally caught him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite decipher, something between curiosity and a deeper emotion she hesitated to name. A week after her arrival, Hope was hanging laundry on the line behind the house when she heard the sound of approaching hooves. Looking up, she saw a cloud of dust on the road that led to the ranch. A few minutes later, a rider came into view, a young man on a lathered horse that had clearly been pushed hard. Hope shaded her eyes against the sun, and as the rider drew closer, her heart nearly stopped. It was Patrick. Her brother reined in his horse near where she stood, swinging down from the saddle with the easy grace he had always possessed. At 20 years old, Patrick was handsome in a boyish way, with the same honey-brown hair as Hope but their father's green eyes instead of their mother's blue ones. "Hope," he said, taking a step toward her. "Thank God you're all right." Hope backed away, clutching a damp shirt to her chest like a shield. "What are you doing here, Patrick?" "Looking for you, of course," he said, his expression a mixture of relief and apprehension. "When I heard what happened, that you were sold because of my debt, I couldn't believe it. I've been searching everywhere for you." "Where were you when they put me on that auction block?" Hope demanded, anger rising in her throat. "Where were you when I needed you most?" Patrick's face fell. "I was trying to win back the money, Hope. I thought if I could just get enough for one more game, I could pay off Thornton and everything would be fine." "Everything is not fine," Hope said, her voice shaking. "Do you have any idea what you did to me?" "What could have happened if Mr. Young hadn't been there?" Patrick looked confused. "Mr. Young, the rancher, is that who bought you?" "He didn't buy me," Hope snapped. "He paid my debt your debt and gave me my freedom. He offered me honest work with fair pay, which is more than you ever did." Patrick took another step toward her, hands outstretched. "Hope, please, I made a terrible mistake. I've been sick with worry about you. Come back to Seattle with me. I've got a job at the docks now, a real job. We can start over." Before Hope could respond, she heard Tyler's voice behind her. "Is everything all right, Miss O'Malley?" She turned to see Tyler approaching from the direction of the barn, his expression guarded as he assessed the situation. "This is my brother, Patrick," Hope said stiffly. "Patrick, this is Mr. Tyler Young." The two men sized each other up. Patrick was taller than Hope, but still several inches shorter than Tyler and much slighter in build. Something like recognition flashed in Patrick's eyes. "You're the one who paid my sister's debt," he said. Tyler's face remained impassive. "I paid the debt that you incurred and then abandoned her to face." Patrick flushed. "I made a mistake. I've come to make it right." "Have you brought $1,000 with you?" Tyler asked coolly. Patrick's flush deepened. "No, but then you haven't come to make anything right," Tyler interrupted. "You've come to ease your conscience at your sister's expense. Again." Hope was startled by the vehemence in Tyler's tone. In the week she had known him, he had never spoken with such barely controlled anger. "This is between me and my sister," Patrick said, squaring his shoulders. "Your sister works for me now," Tyler replied, "and she seems upset by your presence." Hope found her voice. "I am upset, Patrick. You betrayed me in the worst possible way." "I can't just forget that because you've decided you're sorry now." Patrick's expression hardened. "So that's it. You're choosing to stay here with him instead of coming home with your own brother." "This is my home now," Hope said, the words surprising her even as she spoke them. But she realized they were true. In just a week, the Circle Y Ranch had become more of a home to her than the rented rooms in Seattle had ever been. Patrick looked between Hope and Tyler, his eyes narrowing. "I see how it is. Found yourself a rich rancher, did you? Better than slaving away as a seamstress." Tyler took a step forward, his hands clenched at his sides, but Hope moved between the two men. "You should go, Patrick," she said firmly. "I'm not ready to forgive you, maybe someday, but not today." For a moment, Hope thought her brother might argue further, but then his shoulders slumped. "Fine, but I'll be back, Hope, when you're ready to listen." He mounted his horse, cast one last glare at Tyler, and then wheeled the animal around and galloped back down the road, leaving a cloud of dust in his wake. Hope stood watching until he was out of sight, emotions warring within her: anger, hurt, and despite everything, a lingering concern for her only sibling. "Are you all right?" Tyler asked quietly, coming to stand beside her. Hope realized she was still clutching the damp shirt, now wrinkled in her grip. "Yes, no, I don't know." Tyler gently took the shirt from her hands. "Why don't you go sit on the porch for a bit? I'll finish hanging these." Hope looked up at him in surprise. "You don't have to do that." "I want to," Tyler said simply. The kindness in his voice nearly undid her. Hope nodded and walked slowly to the porch, sinking onto the wooden bench that faced west toward the mountains. She could hear the soft sounds of Tyler hanging laundry, the occasional gentle snap of fabric in the breeze. When he joined her on the porch a few minutes later, Hope had managed to compose herself somewhat. "Thank you," she said, "for the laundry and for standing up for me." Tyler sat beside her, his forearms resting on his knees. "Your brother had no right to speak to you that way," Hope sighed. "Patrick has always been charming but selfish. Our parents indulged him, especially our mother. After they died, I tried to keep him on the right path, but—" She shook her head. "I failed, obviously." "You didn't fail," Tyler said firmly. "He made his choices, just as my grandfather made his." Hope turned to look at Tyler's profile, strong and steady against the backdrop of the late afternoon sky. "What happened to your mother, if you don't mind my asking?" Tyler was quiet for a long moment. "After my grandfather sold her, she became a housekeeper for a cattle baron in Texas. His son returned from back east and fell in love with her. They married, despite his father's objections." A small smile touched his lips. "That was my father. He was a good man. Were they happy?" Hope asked. "Yes, very, until the fever took them both when I was 16. I worked on my grandfather's ranch for 2 years after that, saved every penny, then joined a cattle drive north. Did that for 6 years before buying this place." Hope absorbed his story, understanding now why he had been so moved to action at the auction. "Your mother would be proud of the man you've become," she said softly. Tyler turned to look at her, and for a moment the carefully maintained distance between them seemed to vanish. "I hope so." They sat in companionable silence as the sun began its descent toward the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Hope felt a curious peace settle over her, despite the tumultuous encounter with her brother. Here in this moment, she felt safe in a way she hadn't since before her parents died. "Will you go back to Seattle with him?" Tyler asked eventually, his voice carefully neutral. "If he returns," Hope considered the question. "No," she said at last. "There's nothing for me there anymore, and I—" She hesitated, then continued, "I like it here. I feel useful, respected." Tyler nodded, and Hope thought she saw relief in his eyes. "You are respected, Miss O'Malley, more than you know." The warmth that bloomed in Hope's chest at his words had nothing to do with the setting sun. As Tyler rose to light the lamps inside the house, Hope remained on the porch a moment longer, watching the first stars appear in the darkening sky. For the first time since the awful day of the auction, she felt truly free, not just from her brother's debt, but from the weight of responsibility that had burdened her for so long. At Circle Y Ranch, she was finding not just employment, but perhaps a new beginning, and a man whose quiet strength and integrity were beginning to mean more to her than she dared admit, even to herself. The weeks that followed Patrick's visit saw a subtle shift in the atmosphere at Circle Y Ranch. Hope settled more confidently into her role, making the house truly livable for the first time since Tyler had built it. Fresh curtains appeared at the windows, made from fabric she found in an old trunk. The floors gleamed with beeswax polish, and the scent of fresh bread and pies regularly wafted from the kitchen. For his part, Tyler seemed to spend more time at the house than before. He began taking his lunch on the porch rather than in the fields, and in the evenings, he would often sit in the main room reading while Hope mended or knitted by lamplight. Sometimes they would discuss the books they had read, discovering a shared appreciation for Dickens and Austen, as well as more practical volumes about farming and animal husbandry. On a warm afternoon in late May, Tyler returned to the house earlier than usual. Hope was in the garden she had started behind the kitchen, planting rows of vegetables that would feed them through the summer and into fall. "Miss O'Malley," Tyler called as he approached, "I need to ride into Seattle tomorrow for supplies. I thought you might like to come along." Hope straightened, brushing dirt from her hands. The prospect of returning to Seattle made her stomach tighten with anxiety. "I'm not sure that's a good idea, Mr. Young." Tyler tilted his head slightly. "Are you worried about running into your brother?" "Partly," Hope admitted. "And partly." "Well, everyone in town saw me on that auction block. I can't imagine facing them again." Tyler's expression softened. You have nothing to be ashamed of, Miss O'Malley, but I understand if you'd prefer not to go. Hope considered his words. She did need some personal items that couldn't be found at the ranch, and hiding away forever wasn't a solution. Perhaps it was best to face the town sooner rather than later. Actually, she said slowly, I think I will come with you. There are a few things I need. Tyler smiled, a rare full smile that transformed his serious face. Good, we'll leave at dawn. The next morning, Hope dressed in her best dress, a modest blue cotton with white trim that she had recently altered to fit her better. She pinned her hair up neatly and added the small pearl earrings that had belonged to her mother, her only piece of jewelry besides the wedding ring she kept in the wooden box. When she emerged from her room, she found Tyler waiting in the main room. He too had made an effort with his appearance, wearing a clean shirt and his newer pair of trousers, his dark hair still damp from washing. You look very nice, Miss O'Malley, he said, his eyes lingering on her for a moment before he looked away. Thank you, Mr. Young, so do you. They ate a quick breakfast and set off just as the sun was cresting the horizon. Tyler had hitched the wagon rather than saddling horses, explaining that they would need the space for supplies. Hope sat beside him on the bench seat, a light shawl around her shoulders against the morning chill. As the wagon rolled along the road toward Seattle, Hope found herself acutely aware of Tyler's presence beside her, the subtle scent of soap and leather that clung to him, the steady way he handled the reins, the occasional brush of his arm against hers when the wagon hit a rough patch of road. What supplies do you need to purchase? She asked, seeking distraction from her increasingly confusing feelings. Feed for the animals, some tools from the blacksmith, and seed for the fall planting, Tyler replied. And I thought we might have lunch at the hotel. Their dining room serves a decent meal. Hope glanced at him in surprise. Lunch at the hotel was an unexpected luxury. That would be nice. They arrived in Seattle by mid-morning. The town was bustling with activity wagons and horses crowding the main street, shoppers moving from store to store, dock workers unloading cargo from ships in the harbor. Hope tensed as they drove past the square where the auction had taken place, but Tyler steered the wagon down a side street, avoiding the area entirely. They stopped first at the general store, where Tyler helped Hope down from the wagon with a gentle hand at her elbow. Inside, the shopkeeper greeted Tyler warmly. Young, good to see you. Been a while since you've come to town. Been busy at the ranch, Mr. Hanson, Tyler replied. This is Miss O'Malley, my housekeeper. Mr. Hanson's eyes widened slightly in recognition, but to Hope's relief, he simply nodded politely. Miss O'Malley, what can I help you folks with today? Hope presented the list of household supplies they needed while Tyler discussed the larger orders of feed and seed. As they were concluding their business, the bell above the door jingled and a well-dressed woman entered the store, followed by a young man in an expensive suit. Mrs. Thornton, Mr. Hanson said, his tone becoming deferential. How nice to see you today. Hope froze at the name. Thornton, the owner of the gambling house where Patrick had lost so much money, the elegant woman nodded regally. Mr. Hanson, I need a bolt of that blue silk you mentioned last week. My son William is escorting me today. William Thornton, the son of the gambling house owner, stepped forward and his eyes landed on Hope. A slow smile spread across his face. Well, if it isn't the O'Malley girl, he said. I heard you'd been sold to cover your brother's debts, yet here you are, shopping like a free woman. Hope felt her face flame with humiliation. Tyler stepped closer to her, his body tense. Miss O'Malley works for me now, he said, his voice level but with an edge of steel. Her brother's debt has been paid in full. William Thornton looked Tyler up and down with obvious disdain. Ah, yes. The cowboy with more money than sense. My father was quite amused when he heard about your gallant gesture. William, his mother admonished quietly, looking uncomfortable, but William continued, his eyes fixed on Hope. Your brother tried to return to our establishment last week, you know. Claimed he had a new system that couldn't fail. We turned him away, of course. Once a man sells his sister to cover his debts, his credit is rather permanently damaged. Hope felt as though she'd been slapped. Patrick had told her he was working at the docks, yet he had tried to return to gambling. Tyler's hand came to rest lightly at the small of Hope's back, a steadying presence. "If you'll excuse us," he said to the Thorntons, "we have other business to attend to." He guided Hope toward the door, but William Thornton called after them, "You know, young, if you ever tire of your purchase, my father might be interested. He has a weakness for pretty things." Tyler stopped dead. For a moment, Hope thought he might turn and strike the younger man. Instead, he said in a voice so cold it could have frozen the sound waves themselves, "Miss O'Malley is not a purchase. She is a free woman who works for fair wages. You would do well to remember that before you speak of her again." With that, he escorted Hope out of the store and into the bright sunlight of the street. Hope was trembling, tears threatening to spill from her eyes. "I'm sorry," Tyler said softly. "Perhaps coming to town was a mistake." Hope took a deep breath, forcing back her tears. "No. I won't let them drive me away. I won't give them that satisfaction." Tyler studied her face, and something like pride flickered in his eyes. "All right then, shall we continue our errands?" They proceeded to the blacksmith, where Tyler ordered new horseshoes and had a broken plow blade repaired. Hope remained close to his side, drawing strength from his solid presence. To her relief, they encountered no more unpleasantness as they completed their tasks. By noon, both were ready for a respite. Tyler led the way to the Seattle Hotel, a 3-story building that was the pride of the growing city. The dining room was elegant by frontier standards, with white tablecloths and gleaming silverware. As the waiter led them to a table, Hope was acutely aware of the glances from other diners. Whether they were looking at her because they recognized her from the auction or simply because she was with one of the area's bachelor ranchers, she couldn't tell. "Try to ignore them," Tyler said quietly as they sat down. "People will always talk, but it matters less than you think." Hope smiled gratefully. "You seem very wise about such things, Mr. Young." A shadow crossed his face. "Not wise, just experienced. My mother endured far worse gossip than this." Their meal arrived: roast beef with vegetables for Tyler, chicken pie for Hope, and coffee for both. The food was indeed excellent, far better than what Hope could prepare at the ranch with their limited supplies. As they ate, Tyler seemed to relax somewhat, even sharing a story about his early days as a cattle driver that made Hope laugh out loud. She was so engaged in their conversation that she didn't notice the man approaching their table until he was standing beside her. "Hope, I thought that was you." Hope looked up to see Dr. James Carroll, the town physician who had treated her parents during their final illness and who had always been kind to her and Patrick afterward. "Dr. Carroll," she said, genuinely pleased to see him. "How are you?" "Very well, my dear, and relieved to see you looking healthy and happy." He glanced at Tyler with undisguised curiosity. Tyler stood and extended his hand. "Tyler Young, sir. I own the Circle Y ranch outside of town." Dr. Carroll shook his hand firmly. "James Carroll, I've known Hope since she was a child. Her parents were good friends of mine." "Please join us, Doctor," Hope said impulsively, wanting Tyler to meet someone from her past who had positive associations. Dr. Carroll pulled up a chair. "Just for a moment, I wouldn't want to intrude on your meal." As they conversed, Hope was gratified to see the respect with which the doctor treated Tyler and the ease with which Tyler engaged with the older man on topics ranging from the weather to the growth of Seattle. There was no mention of the auction or Patrick, for which Hope was deeply grateful. After a few minutes, Dr. Carroll rose to leave. "I must get back to my patients, but Hope," he added, taking her hand, "it does my heart good to see you well settled. Your parents would be pleased." The simple statement brought unexpected tears to Hope's eyes. "Thank you, Doctor." After the physician departed, Hope and Tyler finished their meal in thoughtful silence. As they left the hotel, Tyler said, "He seems like a good man." "He is," Hope agreed. "One of the few in Seattle who never treated me differently after my parents died and our circumstances changed." Tyler nodded. Such people are rare and valuable. They completed the last of their errands and loaded the supplies into the wagon. As they prepared to leave town, Tyler hesitated. "There's one more stop I'd like to make, if you don't mind," he said. "The bookshop. I thought you might like to choose something new to read." Hope's heart warmed at the thoughtful gesture. I'd like that very much. The bookshop was small but well stocked, with volumes ranging from practical guides to novels to religious texts. The proprietor, an elderly man with spectacles perched on his nose, greeted them warmly. "Take your time," Tyler told Hope. "Select whatever interests you." Hope browsed the shelves with growing excitement. It had been months since she had had the luxury of a new book. Finally, she selected a novel by George Eliot and a practical guide to gardening in the Pacific Northwest. When she brought her choices to the counter, Tyler was already there, paying for a book of his own, a collection of poetry by Walt Whitman. "I didn't take you for a poetry reader, Mr. Young," Hope said as they left the shop. Tyler looked slightly embarrassed. "I'm not usually, but the shopkeeper recommended it, said it captures something about America that prose can't quite manage." The simple admission that this strong, capable man was willing to try something new based on a recommendation touched Hope deeply. It spoke to an openness of mind that she found increasingly appealing. As they left Seattle behind, Hope felt a curious mixture of emotions. The encounter with William Thornton had been painful, but the lunch with Dr. Carroll and the visit to the bookshop had reminded her that there were good people in the world, people like Tyler Young, who judged others by their character rather than their circumstances. The sun was beginning its descent as they neared the ranch, casting long shadows across the road. Hope watched Tyler's profile as he guided the horses, struck by how familiar and yet how mysterious he still was to her. In the 2 months since he had saved her from the auction block, she had come to respect him deeply. But lately, she had begun to feel something more, a warmth that spread through her chest when he smiled, a flutter in her stomach when their hands accidentally touched. It was a dangerous feeling. Tyler was her employer, her benefactor. Whatever his reasons for helping her, she had no indication that he saw her as anything more than someone in need of assistance, and now a competent housekeeper. Yet as the wagon rolled toward home for the circle, why had truly become home to her, Hope couldn't help but wonder if the future might hold something she hadn't dared to imagine since the day her life had been so dramatically upended. Not just security and independence, but perhaps even love. Summer arrived at Circle Y Ranch in a blaze of golden sunshine and fields thick with wildflowers. Hope's vegetable garden flourished under her careful tending, providing fresh produce for their meals. She had also taken over a small patch of ground near the house for flowers, marigolds, zinnias, and bachelor's buttons, adding splashes of color to the otherwise practical landscape. Tyler noticed and appreciated the changes Hope brought to the ranch. One evening in late June, he returned from the fields to find her arranging fresh flowers in a mason jar on the dining table. "The place has never looked so welcoming," he said, removing his hat and hanging it by the door. Hope smiled, pleased by the compliment. "It's amazing what a few flowers can do to brighten a room." "It's not just the flowers," Tyler said, his voice softening. "It's you, Miss O'Malley. You've brought life back to this house." Their eyes met across the room, and Hope felt heat rise to her cheeks at the warmth in his gaze. These moments had been occurring more frequently, brief connections that hinted at feelings deeper than employer and employee. But always, one of them would look away, maintaining the careful boundary between them. This time it was Hank who broke the moment, stomping in from outside with news about a fence that needed repair. Tyler turned his attention to his foreman, and Hope returned to preparing dinner, but the memory of his words stayed with her. As June gave way to July, the days grew hotter. The work on the ranch increased as well, with Tyler and Hank busy from dawn until dusk maintaining the property and caring for the cattle. Hope found herself adding tasks to her own routine, bringing cold water to the men in the fields, occasionally helping with the lighter outdoor chores, and tending to the kitchen garden in the early morning and late evening to avoid the midday heat. One particularly sweltering afternoon, Hope decided to take a break from her indoor tasks and walk to the creek that ran through the property. The water was always cool, fed by mountain springs, and she thought she might soak her feet for a while before returning to the bread dough that was rising in the kitchen. She followed the path that led through a small stand of cottonwood trees to the creek, carrying a book and a small cloth bundle containing bread and cheese. The sound of water flowing over rocks reached her before she emerged from the trees, and she smiled in anticipation of the cool relief ahead. But as she stepped into the clearing by the creek, she stopped short. Tyler was there, standing waist deep in the water, his back to her. He had clearly been washing up after his morning's work, his dark hair wet and slicked back, water droplets glistening on his bare shoulders in the dappled sunlight. Hope knew she should retreat immediately. It was improper to intrude on his privacy this way. But before she could move, Tyler turned and saw her. For a frozen moment they stared at each other, equally startled. "I'm so sorry," Hope gasped, already backing away. "I didn't realize. It's all right," Tyler said quickly. "I was just finishing up, if you'll give me a moment." Hope turned her back, mortified. "I'll go back to the house." "No need," Tyler called. "I'm decent now." Hope turned cautiously. Tyler had pulled on his shirt, though it clung to his still damp skin. He was making his way toward the bank where his boots stood. "I truly am sorry," Hope said, unable to meet his eyes. "I should have called out before approaching." "It's a hot day," Tyler said, his voice surprisingly gentle. "The creek is the coolest place on the property. It's natural you'd seek it out." He sat on a rock to pull on his boots, then stood, running a hand through his wet hair. "Were you planning to read?" he asked, nodding toward the book in her hands. Hope nodded, still embarrassed. "And maybe cool my feet a bit." "It's a good spot for both," Tyler said. He hesitated, then added, "I could leave you to your privacy, or I could stay and we could talk for a while if you'd like the company." The offer surprised Hope. In their 3 months of living under the same roof, they had rarely spent time together outside of meals and evenings in the main room. The prospect of sitting by the creek with Tyler, away from the responsibilities of the house and ranch, made her heart beat a little faster. "I'd like the company," she said softly. Tyler smiled, and they settled on a large, flat rock beside the creek. Hope removed her shoes and stockings and dangled her feet in the cool water, sighing with relief. After a moment's hesitation, Tyler did the same. "This is the first ranch I looked at when I came to Washington Territory," Tyler said as they watched the water flow past. "I knew it was the right place as soon as I saw this creek. Water is life out here. It's beautiful," Hope agreed. "Much prettier than Seattle." Tyler glanced at her. "Do you miss the city at all?" Hope considered the question. "I miss some things, the bookshop, Dr. Carroll, the sound of the harbor bells in the morning." She paused. "But I don't miss our rooms, or the endless sewing I did for ladies who looked down on me, or watching Patrick gamble away what little we had." "You were a seamstress?" Tyler asked. Hope nodded. "After our parents died, I took in mending and alterations. Later, I began making dresses for some of the merchants' wives. It wasn't bad work, but—" She trailed off, unsure how to express the emptiness she had felt in those days. "But it wasn't enough," Tyler finished for her. "No," Hope admitted. "It wasn't. There was no purpose to it, just survival." Tyler nodded, understanding in his eyes. "That's how I felt during the cattle drives. Good money, but no roots, no real purpose beyond the next paycheck." "Is that why you bought the ranch?" Hope asked. "Partly," Tyler said, "and partly because I wanted to build something that would last. Something that was mine, that no one could take away." The weight of his words hung in the air between them. Hope thought of all he had told her about his mother, about the grandfather who had sold her, about the precariousness of freedom in a world where people could be treated as property. "You've built something wonderful here," Hope said softly. Tyler's eyes met hers, and this time neither looked away. "It was just a place until you came," he said, his voice low. "Now it feels like a home." Hope's breath caught in her throat at the naked emotion in his eyes. For a moment she thought he might reach for her hand, might even lean closer. But then a distant shout broke the spell. Hank calling for Tyler from somewhere near the barn. Tyler sighed, pulling his feet from the water and reaching for his socks. "Duty calls." Hope nodded, trying to hide her disappointment. "Of course." As Tyler stood to leave, he hesitated, then said, "Would you like to go riding tomorrow? I could show you more of the property. There's a meadow on the north side filled with wildflowers this time of year." "I'd like that," Hope said, unable to keep the smile from her face. But I should warn you, I'm not much of a rider. Tyler smiled back, the expression transforming his usually serious face. I'll find you the gentlest mare in the stable. We'll go after breakfast if that suits you. It does, Hope replied. She watched him walk back toward the house, his tall figure disappearing among the cottonwoods. Only when he was gone did she allow herself to acknowledge the feeling that had been growing in her heart for weeks now, a feeling that went far beyond gratitude or friendship. Hope O'Malley was falling in love with Tyler Young. The realization should have frightened her. He was her employer, her rescuer, a man who had seen her at her most vulnerable. The power imbalance between them was undeniable, yet somehow with Tyler that imbalance never felt exploitative. From the moment he had paid her brother's debt and declared her free, he had treated her with a respect and consideration that had gradually eroded her defenses. As Hope sat by the creek, listening to the water's gentle murmur, she wondered if Tyler might possibly feel the same way about her. There had been moments like the one they had just shared when she thought she glimpsed something more than kindness in his eyes, but even if he did share her feelings, would he ever act on them? Tyler Young was an honorable man, perhaps to a fault. Would he see any romantic overture as taking advantage of her position? Hope sighed, trailing her fingers through the cool water. Tomorrow they would ride together, just the two of them. Perhaps away from the ranch, away from the roles of employer and employee, they might finally speak the words that seemed to hover unspoken between them. As Hope had feared, she was indeed not much of a rider. The morning after their encounter at the creek, Tyler saddled a gentle bay mare for her and patiently demonstrated how to mount and sit properly in the saddle. "Keep your back straight but not stiff," he instructed, adjusting her posture with a light touch at her shoulder. "And hold the reins firmly but not too tight. Daisy here is well trained and knows what to do, but she needs to feel your guidance." Hope nodded, concentrating on following his instructions while also trying to ignore the flutter in her stomach whenever he came close. Tyler mounted his own horse, a tall black gelding named Thunder, and led the way from the stable yard. They rode at a walk, Tyler keeping a watchful eye on Hope as she grew accustomed to the motion of the horse beneath her. The day was warm but not as hot as the previous one, with a light breeze that carried the scent of pine and wildflowers. "You're doing well," Tyler called over his shoulder as they followed a trail that wound through a stand of Douglas firs. "Daisy likes you." Hope laughed, patting the horse's neck. "The feeling is mutual. She's very patient with my clumsiness." As they emerged from the trees, Hope gasped at the view before them. A wide meadow stretched toward distant hills, the grass rippling in the breeze like waves on a green sea. And as Tyler had promised, wildflowers bloomed everywhere: purple lupines, orange California poppies, blue cornflowers, and yellow daisies, creating a natural tapestry of color. "It's beautiful," Hope breathed. Tyler smiled, clearly pleased by her reaction. "I found this place by accident during my first winter here. I was tracking a lost calf and came upon the meadow covered in snow. I made a note to return in summer, and when I did," he gestured at the view before them, nature's own garden. They dismounted at the edge of the meadow, tethering the horses loosely to allow them to graze. Tyler spread a blanket he had brought in his saddlebag, and they sat side by side, looking out over the flower-filled expanse. From his bag, Tyler produced a small feast: bread, cheese, apples, and a jar of honey. "I thought we might have a picnic," he said, suddenly looking somewhat bashful. "It's a long ride back to the house for lunch." Hope was touched by his thoughtfulness. "This is perfect." As they ate, Tyler pointed out landmarks visible from their vantage point: the distant shimmer of Puget Sound, the snow-capped peak of Mount Rainier, and the far boundary of the Circle Y Ranch where it met the neighboring property. "Who owns the land beyond yours?" Hope asked. "A man named Harris," Tyler replied. "Decent fellow, raises sheep mostly. We help each other out when needed, though we don't socialize much." "Is he married?" Hope asked, curious about their neighbors. Tyler nodded. "Wife and 3 children. They came out from Vermont about 5 years ago." "Do you ever wish for a family of your own?" The question slipped out before Hope could consider its implications, and she immediately felt her cheeks grow warm. Tyler was quiet for a moment, looking out over the meadow. "Yes," he said finally, "I do. A home isn't really complete without a family to fill it." He turned to look at Hope, his blue eyes serious. "What about you, Miss O'Malley? Did you ever think of marriage back in Seattle?" Hope looked down at the blanket, smoothing an invisible wrinkle. "There was a young man, the son of a merchant, who showed interest for a time, but when my parents died and our circumstances changed, he quickly found another young lady whose prospects were better." "He was a fool," Tyler said quietly. Hope looked up, surprised by the vehemence in his voice. "Any man who would judge your worth by your financial circumstances doesn't deserve you," Tyler continued. His gaze held hers, unwavering. Hope's heart beat faster. "And how would you judge a woman's worth, Mr. Young?" "By her character," Tyler said without hesitation. "By her kindness, her strength, her integrity, by the way she faces adversity without losing her essential self." The intensity in his eyes made Hope catch her breath. "Those are admirable qualities to value." "They are qualities I have observed in you, Miss O'Malley," Tyler said, his voice dropping lower. "From the first moment I saw you on that auction block, standing with dignity despite your circumstances." Hope felt tears prick at her eyes at the memory. "I was terrified that day." "Yet you didn't let it break you," Tyler said. "You maintained your sense of self-worth even when others tried to reduce you to a commodity." A tear slipped down Hope's cheek. Tyler reached out hesitantly, then gently brushed it away with his thumb. His hand lingered at her face, warm against her skin. "Hope," he said softly, using her given name for the first time. "I brought you here today because I wanted to talk to you away from the ranch, away from our roles as employer and employee." Hope's pulse quickened at his words and the tender way he had spoken her name. "Yes," Tyler took a deep breath, as if gathering his courage. "These past 3 months, having you at Circle Y, I've come to realize something. The ranch was never really home until you came. It was just a place I owned, a business I ran, but now—" He looked around at the land stretching before them. "Now it feels like home, because of you." Hope could hardly breathe as Tyler's words sank in. "Tyler," she whispered, his name feeling new and right on her lips. "I know it's improper," he continued quickly. "I know there are those who would say I'm taking advantage of your position. That's why I've kept my distance, why I've tried to maintain proper boundaries. But I can't pretend anymore that what I feel for you is simply respect or friendship." He took her hand in his touch gentle but sure. "I love you, Hope O'Malley. I think I began falling in love with you the moment you looked me in the eye on that auction block and demanded to know what my intentions were." A laugh bubbled up through Hope's tears. "I was terrified you were just another bidder." "I know," Tyler said, squeezing her hand, "and I've tried every day since to prove that I'm not that kind of man, that I see you as an equal, not a possession." "You have," Hope assured him, "every day in 100 small ways." She took a deep breath, gathering her courage. "And I love you too, Tyler Young, not because you saved me, though I'll always be grateful for that. I love you because you're the most honorable man I've ever known, because you've shown me what it means to be truly respected, truly valued." The joy that bloomed on Tyler's face at her words made Hope's heart swell. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he leaned forward. Their lips met in a kiss that was gentle at first, then deepened as Hope slid her arms around his neck. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless. Tyler rested his forehead against hers, a smile playing at his lips. "I've wanted to do that for weeks," he admitted. "Why didn't you?" Hope asked, though she thought she knew the answer. "I needed to be sure you knew you had choices," Tyler said, "that you weren't obligated to me in any way." Hope touched his face, tracing the strong line of his jaw. "You gave me my freedom, Tyler, the greatest gift I've ever received. I choose you freely with my whole heart." They kissed again, longer this time, as a warm breeze swept across the meadow, carrying the sweet scent of wildflowers. When they finally began the ride back to the ranch, Hope felt as though she were floating rather than riding. The world seemed transformed, brighter and more vivid than before. As the Circle Y came into view, Tyler reined in his horse and Hope stopped beside him. For a moment, they sat looking at the ranch house nestled against the backdrop of trees and mountains. "If you're willing," Tyler said, "I'd like to speak to the minister in Seattle next week about us." Hope's heart soared at his words. "I'm willing, more than willing." Tyler smiled, reaching across to take her hand. "It won't be easy. There will be talk in town, people who remember how we met." "Let them talk," Hope said with newfound confidence. "What matters is what we know to be true." As they rode the final distance to the house, Hope felt a sense of rightness settle over her. 3 months ago, she had stood on an auction block, her future bleaker than she could have imagined. Now she was riding toward a home and a life with a man who valued her for exactly who she was. It wasn't the life she had imagined for herself, but it was better than any dream she could have crafted on her own, a life built on respect, mutual choice, and love that had grown naturally from the most unlikely of beginnings. The weeks leading up to Hope and Tyler's wedding were busy ones at Circle Y Ranch. Once their engagement was announced, Hank insisted on helping Tyler add a proper front porch to the house as a wedding gift. The two men worked on it in the evenings after their regular ranch chores were complete, the sound of hammering and sawing filling the twilight hours. Hope, meanwhile, used her seamstress skills to create a simple but elegant wedding dress from fine white cotton ordered from Seattle. She worked on it during quiet afternoons when her household duties were complete, carefully stitching tiny pearl buttons down the back, a detail that had been present on her mother's wedding gown. True to his word, Tyler had ridden into Seattle to speak with Reverend Thomas at the small church Hope had attended with her parents. The minister remembered the O'Malley family fondly, and after a long conversation with Tyler about the unusual circumstances of their meeting, agreed to perform the ceremony. "He wanted to be sure I wasn't taking advantage of you," Tyler explained to Hope upon his return. "That you were entering this marriage of your own free will." "And did you convince him?" Hope asked, touched by the minister's concern for her welfare. Tyler smiled. "I believe I did. It helped that he's known you since you were a child. He said your parents raised you to be a woman of strong character and clear judgment." Hope felt tears prick her eyes at the mention of her parents. "I wish they could be here to see me marry such a good man." Tyler wrapped his arms around her, holding her close. "I believe they know, Hope. And I promise to try to be the kind of husband they would have wanted for their daughter." They set the wedding date for the first Saturday in August, just 3 weeks away. It would be a small ceremony with few guests. Hank would stand as Tyler's best man, and Hope had written to an old friend from Seattle, Mary Peterson, asking her to be maid of honor. Dr. Carroll had also promised to attend, and Tyler had invited his neighbor Harris and family. Of Patrick, there had been no word since his appearance at the ranch back in May. Hope had written to him care of his former boarding house in Seattle, informing him of her engagement and inviting him to the wedding, but had received no response. "Are you very disappointed that your brother hasn't replied?" Tyler asked as they sat on the newly completed porch one evening, watching the sunset paint the western sky in shades of gold and crimson. Hope considered the question. "Yes and no," she said finally. "He's my only family, and part of me wishes he could share in my happiness. But another part is still angry with him, still hurt by his betrayal." Tyler took her hand, his thumb gently stroking her palm. "Family is complicated. But Hope, you should know, if Patrick ever truly wants to make amends, if he shows that he's changed, my door will be open to him. He's your brother, and that means something." Hope looked at Tyler with eyes shining with unshed tears. "Thank you," she whispered, "for understanding, for everything." As the wedding day approached, Hope found herself increasingly caught up in a whirl of preparations and emotions. Joy at her future with Tyler mingled with occasional moments of disbelief at how dramatically her life had changed in just a few months. Sometimes she would pause in the middle of a task, overwhelmed by the realization that she was about to become Mrs. Tyler Young, mistress of Circle Y Ranch, wife to a man who had quite literally saved her from a fate she couldn't bear to contemplate. The night before the wedding, Hope sat at the small desk in her room, writing in the journal Tyler had given her as an engagement present. The leather-bound book was meant to be a record of their life together, but Hope had decided to begin it with the story of how they met, a tale she imagined their children and grandchildren might someday want to hear. As she wrote about that fateful day on the auction block, Hope was surprised to find that the memory no longer filled her with shame or fear. Instead, she saw it as the pivotal moment that had led her to Tyler, to Circle Y, to a life richer and more fulfilling than she could have imagined in Seattle. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and bright, with just enough breeze to stir the leaves of the cottonwoods and bring the scent of pine and wildflowers through the open windows of the house. Tyler had spent the night at the Harris farm, adhering to the tradition of not seeing his bride on the wedding day until the ceremony. Mary Peterson arrived early to help Hope dress and arrange her hair. The two young women had been friends since childhood, and Mary's cheerful presence helped calm Hope's wedding day nerves. "You look beautiful," Mary said as she fastened the last pearl button on Hope's dress, "like a princess in a fairy tale." Hope laughed, turning to examine her reflection in the small mirror above the washstand. The dress was indeed lovely, simple in design, but with delicate embroidery at the collar and cuffs that she had worked on for hours. Her honey-brown hair was arranged in a coronet of braids, with a few soft curls framing her face. At her throat hung her mother's pearl pendant, and in her hands she held a bouquet of wildflowers gathered from the meadow where she and Tyler had first declared their love. "Not a princess," Hope corrected gently, "just a very fortunate woman." A knock at the door heralded the arrival of Dr. Carroll, who had offered to escort Hope to the church in place of her father. "My dear," the doctor said, his eyes misting as he took in her appearance. "Your parents would be so proud." The ride to the small church in Seattle seemed both too long and too short to Hope. Her emotions swung between nervous anticipation and calm certainty as the wagon followed the now familiar road into town. The church was decorated simply but beautifully with more wildflowers and greenery from the Olympic forests. As Hope stood in the vestibule, arm linked with Dr. Carroll's, she could hear the soft murmur of voices from within, not many, but enough to fill the small space with a sense of community and celebration. "Ready?" Dr. Carroll asked gently. Hope nodded, her heart too full for words. The church doors opened, and the small gathering rose to their feet. Hope's eyes immediately found Tyler, standing tall and handsome at the altar in a new suit of dark blue. His face, usually so controlled, was alight with joy as he watched her walk toward him. Time seemed to slow as Hope moved down the aisle, aware only of Tyler waiting for her and the knowledge that every step brought her closer to a future they would build together. When Dr. Carroll placed her hand in Tyler's, Hope felt the rightness of it deep in her soul. Tyler's fingers wrapped around hers, strong and sure, and the look in his eyes told her everything she needed to know about his love for her. Reverend Thomas began the ceremony, his voice clear in the hushed church. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today in the sight of God in this company to join this man and this woman in holy matrimony." As the minister spoke of love, honor, and commitment, Hope felt a deep sense of peace settle over her. When it came time to speak their vows, her voice was steady, her heart certain. "I, Hope Elizabeth O'Malley, take thee, Tyler James Young, to be my lawfully wedded husband." Tyler's voice, too, rang clear and true as he made the same promise to her. When he slipped the simple gold band onto her finger, a ring he had ordered specially from Seattle's finest jeweler, his hands trembled slightly, the only outward sign of the emotion he was feeling. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," Reverend Thomas declared. "Tyler, you may kiss your bride." The kiss they shared was brief but tender, mindful of their audience, yet somehow conveying the depth of their feelings for each other. When they turned to face their friends as Mr. and Mrs. Tyler Young, Hope felt as though her heart might burst with happiness. The small reception was held at the hotel dining room, where Tyler had treated Hope to lunch during their first trip to Seattle together. There was cake and champagne, music from a local fiddler, and much good-natured teasing from Hank about how the ranch would change now that Miss Hope was officially the mistress of Circle Y. As hope circulated among their guests, accepting congratulations and well wishes, she was startled to see a familiar figure standing uncertainly in the doorway. Patrick. Her brother looked different, thinner perhaps, but also more mature somehow. His clothes were plain but clean, his hair neatly trimmed. When their eyes met across the room, he offered a hesitant smile. Hope froze, unsure how to react. Before she could decide, Tyler was beside her, his hand resting lightly at the small of her back. "Your brother is here," he said quietly. "Would you like to speak with him?" Hope looked up at her new husband, touched by his concern for her feelings on this day of all days. "Yes," she decided. "I would." Tyler nodded. "I'll be right here if you need me." Hope crossed the room to where Patrick stood, conscious of the curious glances from guests who knew their history. "You came," she said simply when she reached him. Patrick nodded, looking uncomfortable. "I got your letter. I wasn't sure I'd be welcome, but I wanted to see you. To see that you're truly happy." Hope studied her brother's face, looking for signs of the old Patrick, the charming manipulator who had always been able to talk his way out of trouble. Instead, she saw only uncertainty and what appeared to be genuine remorse. "I am happy," she said. "Happier than I've ever been." Patrick nodded again. "Good, that's good." He shifted his weight, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a small package wrapped in brown paper. "I brought you a wedding gift. It's not much, but..." Hope took the package and unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a small silver brooch in the shape of a daisy, simple but pretty. "It reminded me of the ones Mother used to wear," Patrick explained. "I've been working at the lumber mill. Honest work," he added quickly. "No more gambling. I'm trying to be better." Hope felt tears well in her eyes at this small evidence of change in her brother. "Thank you, Patrick. It's beautiful." An awkward silence fell between them. Then Patrick said, "Your husband seems like a good man." "The best," Hope agreed. "Tyler is." She searched for words adequate to describe the man who had not only saved her, but had shown her what true respect and love could be. "He's everything I never knew I needed." Patrick's expression grew serious. "Hope, I know I can never undo what I did to you, but I want you to know that I'm sorry. Truly sorry. It was the most selfish, cowardly thing I've ever done, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life." The simple, straightforward apology without excuses or attempts to minimize what he had done touched Hope deeply. She saw in it a maturity that had been lacking in the brother she had known. "I believe you," she said softly, "and while I can't forget what happened, I think perhaps, with time, we might find a way forward." Patrick's eyes brightened with cautious hope. "I'd like that." Hope felt Tyler approach before she saw him, a warm, solid presence at her side. "Patrick," he said, extending his hand. "Thank you for coming today." Patrick shook Tyler's hand, looking somewhat awed by the gesture. "Mr. Young, I want to thank you for what you did for my sister. And to apologize for the circumstances that made it necessary." "Hope is worth every cent and more," Tyler said simply. "And she's chosen to forgive you enough to welcome you here today. That's good enough for me." He paused, then added, "If you're serious about making a fresh start, the Circle Y could use another pair of hands this fall for the roundup. Paid work, of course." Patrick blinked in surprise at the unexpected offer. "Aye, that's very generous, sir." "Consider it," Tyler said. "Now, if you'll excuse us, I believe they're about to serve the cake, and I'm told it's bad luck for the bride and groom to be apart at such a moment." As they moved away, Hope squeezed Tyler's arm. "Thank you," she whispered, "for giving him a chance." Tyler covered her hand with his own. "Everyone deserves the opportunity to redeem themselves, Hope, and he's your brother. Family is important." The rest of the reception passed in a blur of cake and dancing and laughter. As the afternoon waned, Tyler and Hope said their goodbyes to their guests and boarded the wagon that would take them back to Circle Y Ranch, their home, now truly shared. Hank had promised to stay in town overnight to give the newlyweds privacy, a gesture that made Hope blush when she thought about it. As they drove away from Seattle, she leaned against Tyler's shoulder, content to watch the familiar landscape pass by in comfortable silence. The sun was setting when they reached the ranch, painting the western sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink. Tyler helped Hope down from the wagon, then surprised her by sweeping her into his arms to carry her across the threshold. "Welcome home, Mrs. Young," he said softly, setting her gently on her feet in the main room. Hope looked around at the house that had become so dear to her in the past months, the worn sofa where they had spent evenings reading together, the table where they had shared countless meals, the shelves filled with books they both loved. Now it was truly her home, not as an employee but as Tyler's wife and partner. "It feels different somehow," she said, turning to face him, "knowing I'll never have to leave." Tyler took her face in his hands, his expression tender. "You never would have had to leave, Hope. Even if you hadn't returned my feelings, there would always have been a place for you here." "But I do return them," Hope whispered, rising on tiptoe to kiss him, "with all my heart." Their kiss deepened, free now from the constraints of propriety that had limited their expressions of affection before their marriage. Tyler's arms encircled her waist, drawing her closer, and Hope felt herself responding to his touch with a desire that both thrilled and surprised her. When they finally broke apart, both breathing quickly, Tyler pressed his forehead to hers. "I love you, Hope Young." The sound of her new name on his lips made Hope smile. "And I love you, Tyler Young, today, tomorrow, always." As twilight deepened into night, they moved by unspoken agreement toward the bedroom that was now theirs to share. There, in the soft glow of lamplight, they discovered each other fully for the first time, their union blessed by vows spoken before God and community, but made sacred by the love and respect that had grown between them since that fateful day in Seattle. Later, lying in Tyler's arms as moonlight filtered through the curtains, Hope reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought her to this moment. From the depths of despair on an auction block to the heights of joy in her husband's embrace, it was a path she could never have imagined. Yet one she now knew had led her exactly where she was meant to be. "What are you thinking?" Tyler asked softly, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. Hope smiled in the darkness. "I was thinking about beginnings and endings. How what seemed like the end of everything for me turned out to be the beginning of something wonderful." Tyler pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her temple. "I think that's how life works sometimes. The darkest moments can lead to the brightest dawns if we're brave enough to keep moving forward." "You helped me find that bravery," Hope said, nestling against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "You showed me I was worth fighting for." "You were always worth fighting for," Tyler murmured. "I just reminded you of what you already knew deep down." As sleep began to claim her, Hope made a silent vow to never forget the lessons of these past months, that freedom was precious, that love built on respect was the strongest foundation, and that sometimes the most beautiful stories grew from the most unlikely beginnings. In Tyler's arms, she had found not just safety or security, but a partnership of equals, a love born of choice rather than circumstance. It was everything she had never dared to dream of, yet now it was hers, a future as wide open and full of promise as the western skies above Circle Y Ranch. 5 years later, Hope stood on the front porch of the Circle Y Ranch house, watching as Tyler taught their 3-year-old son James to ride his first pony. The little boy's delighted laughter carried across the yard as the gentle Shetland ambled in a circle, Tyler's steady hand on the lead rope ensuring his safety. "Not too fast, James," Hope called, instinctively placing a protective hand on her rounded belly where their second child, a daughter, she was certain grew steadily larger with each passing day. "He's fine, Hope," Tyler called back, his face alight with pride as he watched their son. "He's a natural, just like his mother." Hope laughed at that. "I was hardly a natural when I first came here. Remember how I could barely stay in the saddle during our ride to the wildflower meadow?" "You've improved considerably since then," Tyler teased, his blue eyes twinkling with the same warmth that still made her heart skip a beat after 5 years of marriage. So much had changed at Circle Y since their wedding day. The house had been expanded to include 2 more bedrooms and a proper dining room. The herd had grown, along with Tyler's reputation as one of the most successful small ranchers in the territory. And most importantly, their family had grown with the addition of James and the imminent arrival of their second child. Patrick, too, had become part of their extended family. After working the fall roundup as Tyler had offered, Hope's brother had proven himself reliable enough to be hired on permanently. He now lived in the bunkhouse with Hank and two other hands Tyler had hired as the ranch expanded. While the brothers-in-law would never be close friends, they had developed a mutual respect based on their shared love for Hope and commitment to the ranch's success. "Mama, look," James called, waving one small hand while clutching the pony's mane with the other. "I'm riding all by myself." Tyler had indeed stepped back slightly, though he remained close enough to intervene if needed. Hope smiled and waved, her heart full as she watched her husband and son together, Tyler patient and encouraging, James fearless and trusting, secure in the knowledge that his father would never let him fall. As the lesson continued, Hope's mind drifted back to the journal she had begun on the eve of her wedding. Over the years, she had faithfully recorded the major events of their life together: their wedding night, the purchase of additional acreage for the ranch, the day Tyler had been elected to the territorial legislature, James's birth, and countless smaller moments that made up the tapestry of their shared life. But she always returned to the beginning of their story, to the moment when a stranger had stepped forward at an auction and changed the course of her life with an act of unexpected compassion. What had seemed at first like an ending, the loss of her freedom, her dignity, her very sense of self, had instead become the beginning of a journey that led to this moment. Standing on the porch of a home built with love, watching her family thrive in the golden afternoon sunshine. The world was not perfect. There were still auctions like the one that had nearly claimed her, still men who viewed women as property, still injustices that needed to be fought. But here, on this patch of earth that she and Tyler tended together, they had created something that stood in defiance of those darker realities: a home where respect and love were the foundation of every interaction, where freedom was cherished because its value was truly understood. Tyler looked up from his lesson with James and caught Hope watching them. Even across the yard, she could see the love in his eyes, a love that had grown deeper and more complex with each passing year, with each challenge faced and overcome together. He said something to James, then led the pony toward the porch. "I think that's enough for one day," he called. "Our young horseman is getting tired." Indeed, James was struggling to keep his eyes open, the excitement of his first riding lesson giving way to the natural fatigue of a child who had skipped his afternoon nap. "Perfect timing," Hope replied. "I just took an apple pie out of the oven." "Pie." James perked up immediately, his drowsiness forgotten. Tyler laughed, lifting their son from the pony's back and setting him on the ground. "Go wash your hands first, Cowboy." As James scampered toward the wash basin on the side porch, Tyler secured the pony to the hitching post and joined Hope on the steps. "How are you feeling?" he asked, his hand coming to rest gently on her belly. "You've been on your feet all day." "I'm fine," Hope assured him. "Though I wouldn't object to sitting for a while with my feet up after dinner." Tyler smiled, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "That can be arranged. I'll read to James tonight so you can rest." Hope leaned into him, grateful as always for his considerate nature. "Have I told you today that I love you?" "Not since breakfast," Tyler replied, his arm tightening around her shoulders. "But I never tire of hearing it." "I love you, Tyler Young," Hope said, looking up into the face that had become as familiar and essential to her as her own reflection. "For the man you were when you saved me, for the man you are now, and for all that you've helped me become." Tyler's eyes softened, and he leaned down to kiss her properly. "And I love you, Hope Young. For the woman who stood tall on that auction block, for the partner who has helped me build this life, and for the mother of our children. You are the heart of Circle Y and the great blessing of my life." James came running back, hands dripping wet from his hasty washing. "Pie now?" he asked hopefully. Hope laughed, holding out her hand to her son. "Yes, pie now, and then perhaps a story from Papa while Mama rests her feet." As they moved into the house together, Tyler, Hope, James, and the daughter still growing beneath Hope's heart, the golden light of the setting sun seemed to follow them, blessing the home they had built with love, respect, and the freedom to choose their own path forward. And in that moment, standing in the warm kitchen with her family around her, Hope knew with absolute certainty that sometimes the darkest days could indeed lead to the brightest futures, and that love, when founded on genuine respect and freely given, could transform even the most painful beginnings into stories worth telling for generations to come.